the battle hymn of the 10th mandala. This is an epic poem consisting of 28 hymns dedicated to various Hindu gods. It's like nothing else in the Vedas. Why? Well, that's what we'll find out today. But first, if you're not already, consider subscribing for more such explorations into the timeless wisdom of ancient India. Now let's begin. So here are some basic facts about the Dashaharana Stotram. It's part of the 10th mandala, which consists of 342 hymns. This mandala has 10 sections, each section called a pada. And they're not just hymns, they're narratives. So it tells the story of the creation of the world, of Indra fighting the demons. In fact, the very last hymn of the Rigveda is part of this narrative. It's a heroic tale with all the action and adventure you'd expect, but there's something else going on in these stories, something much deeper. As we read in the introduction to the 10th mandala, the hymns did more than preserve memory. They preserved identity and power. For in each chant lay the structure of Aryan society. The warriors calling on Indra for strength in battle. The herdsmen and farmers offering to Agni for rain and fertile fields. The priests, guardians of the hymns, mediators between earth and heaven. So there's a social dimension to the Rigveda. It wasn't just a personal relationship between the individual and the divine. The Rigveda also laid out the duties and values of each member of the community and how they fit into the larger social order. It was a way of life. In fact, some scholars argue that the Rigveda served as a kind of spiritual constitution for the Aryans. It reminds us that the concept of dharma, or cosmic order, goes back thousands of years. Anyway, the most important thing to understand about the 10th mandala is that it was composed long after the other 3 mandalas. Scholars estimate that it was put together around 600 BCE. That means that by that time, Vedic culture had developed significantly. You can see that in the complexity of the hymns and the range of topics they cover. The 10th mandala is a major step forward in Indian civilization. It's the foundation of the Vedic system of philosophy, and it marks the beginning of classical Hinduism. Here's how. Let's take a look at the first hymn of the first pada. It says, Agni, the divine messenger, calls us all to come and gather at the sacred place where we shall offer oblations and ghee and well mixed. Soma, to the gods. The point is simple, but profound. Every single person in Aryan society has a role to play in maintaining the cosmic order. Even the gods depend on the humans to keep the universe running smoothly. We have our duties, but they also have theirs. So there's this beautiful balance established in the Rigveda. And the Dashaharana Stotram carries it forward. It shows that by following the Vedic rituals, by chanting the hymns, by offering sacrifices to the gods, we can bring about a state of perfect order, not just in the universe, but also in ourselves. The hymns become a tool for self-realization. They help us discover our true nature, which is divine. So let's dig a little deeper now. Let's talk about the second hymn of the first pada. Some of you might be familiar with it because it contains one of the most famous mantras in Hinduism. Let the noble hymn which has been well recited reach the divine messenger. May he convey it to the supreme God whose light is invoked. He who knows this hymn will cross over death and gain immortality. That's a bold statement, isn't it? But then again, the Rigveda is not known for being shy. These hymns are powerful because they make big claims. They promise great rewards for those who follow the Vedic way of life. Who wouldn't want that? Immortality is a pretty good perk. But there's more to this hymn than that. Think about the imagery. The speaker is calling out to Agni, the divine messenger, to carry his message to the supreme God. There's a sense of urgency here, a desire to reach the divine as quickly as possible. And what does the messenger do? He conveys the message. He acts as a link between the human and the divine. That's the role of the priest in Aryan society. Is the one who recites the hymns, who performs the sacrifices, who brings people closer to the gods. But the hymn also suggests that the priest is not just a passive conduit. He has the power to control the course of events. If he knows the hymns, if he understands their meaning, he can use them to bring about a state of perfect order in the universe. He can even conquer death itself. That leads us to the third hymn, which celebrates the power of the hymns themselves. It says, these hymns are the light of heaven. They bring us wealth, health, and long life. They protect us from evil and danger. And those who know them will never go to hell. Again, there's a sense of empowerment here. Hymns are not just words, they're tools. though they're weapons against the forces of darkness. And when we recite them, we tap into that power, become channels of divine energy. But the hymn also reminds us that with great power comes great responsibility. Those who know the hymns must use them wisely. They should not be used for selfish or destructive purposes. Rather, they should be used to bring about order, peace, and harmony. Otherwise, they could do great harm. Let's move on to the fourth hymn, which is all about the importance of understanding the meaning of the hymns. It says, "He who knows the meaning of these hymns will not fear death. Even if he were to die, he would be born again in a higher state." Now that's a powerful thought. It suggests that the knowledge contained in the hymns is not just theoretical, it's practical. It can be applied to our own lives. And the results are nothing short of miraculous. To understand the meaning of the hymns is to understand the nature of reality. It's to realize that death is an illusion. It's to discover the path to enlightenment. But the hymn also suggests that this knowledge is not for everyone. Only those who are qualified, who have done the necessary sadhana, who have cultivated the right qualities of mind and heart, can truly understand the hymns. For the rest, they may hear the words, but they will never grasp the deeper meaning. The fifth hymn is a prayer to Savitar, the sun god. It says, "O Savitar, you have made the waters flow. You have made the herbs grow. You have made the birds fly. Grant us, O God, your boons." Here we see the connection between the Vedic tradition and the natural world. The Vedic people were not just observers of nature, they were participants in it. They understood that they were part of a larger whole, that everything in the universe was interconnected. And so they prayed to the sun god, not just for themselves, but also for the rain, for the crops, for the animals, for all living beings. That's the spirit of Dashaharana Stotram. It's a call to live in harmony with nature, to respect all forms of life, and to recognize the divine spark in everything. Now, in the next video, we'll explore further the sixth hymn and the rest of the first pada. But before that, I want to ask you a question. What do you think is the main message of Dashaharana Stotram? How can it be applied to our own lives today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Now, if you found this video insightful, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. Your support motivates us to keep creating such educational content. So why do we feel the Rigveda is so vast? Because it's not the story of one voice, but the echo of many voices woven into one. When the tribes sang together, every man and woman felt they were more than just individuals. They were part of a chain, a stream that flowed beyond their lifetime. This is a story from India, a country where the world's first epic poem was born. A poem so old that it predates writing. This poem is called the Rigveda, and unlike most poems, this one wasn't written by one person. It was collected over several centuries. If you want to know how big it is, I'll tell you. The Rigveda contains 1,028 hymns. These hymns contain more than 10,000 verses. All these verses are divided into 10 books, or mandalas. Each mandala is like a different world, yet they all fit together like pieces of a puzzle. And each piece adds to the beauty of the whole. But what's even more amazing is this. These hymns weren't written down for 600 years. They were kept in the minds of poets and passed down orally through generations. That's right. For hundreds of years, these poems were like a game of telephone, and yet they remained exactly the same. Now that's some serious skill. And if you think that's impressive, wait till you hear this. Some scholars believe that the oldest parts of the Rigveda were composed around 1500 BCE. Can you imagine the kind of India that existed back then? The Indus Valley civilization had collapsed. New kingdoms were rising. But despite all the changes, the Rigveda stood strong. See, the Rigveda wasn't just a collection of poems. It was a way of life for the people who lived back then. It taught them about the world and their place in it. It helped them understand the seasons and the stars. It guided them in times of joy and sorrow. In short, the Rigveda was like the internet of ancient India, except instead of cat videos, they had hymns about nature and life. Now let's talk about those hymns. They're not your typical love poems or sad songs, no sir. They're full of action. There's praise for the gods, prayers for help, and even complaints about the weather. One minute the sky is being praised for sending rain, the next it's being scolded for causing floods. I mean, can you blame them? When your crops are washed away, you gotta say something. Now here's where things get interesting. Most of these hymns are addressed to nature. There's a deity, the mother goddess, who represents the sky, and there's Dios, the father god who represents the sun. And then you have the Asvins, these divine horses, who pull the sun's chariot across the sky. You see, for these ancient people, nature wasn't just something they lived with. It was something they respected and revered. In fact, many of these hymns were actually songs of praise for natural phenomena. Take this one, for example. It talks about how the sun, moon, and dawn work together to chase away darkness. Isn't that a beautiful image? Or how about this one? It describes how the wind carries the fragrance of flowers from one place to another. The ancient Indians weren't just observers of nature. They were active participants in it. They celebrated it, respected it, and understood it intimately. Let me tell you. The Rigveda is filled with such vivid imagery that you can almost taste the flavors and feel the textures it describes. Just think about it. People back then didn't have iPhones or Netflix. They didn't need them. The Rigveda was their entertainment. It was their way of making sense of the world. When I read these hymns, I can't help but smile. I mean, check out this one. It talks about how the gods played hide and seek with each other, and guess who won? It's the one and only Prajapati. But don't worry, he wasn't a sore winner. Shared his victory with all the other gods. How cool is that? Then there's this hymn that talks about how the gods got drunk at a party and started dancing. They were so into it that they forgot all about their responsibilities. Talk about letting loose. But hey, even the gods need a good time, right? Telling you, the Rigveda is like a treasure trove of stories. There's everything from tales of heroism to accounts of battles, and let's not forget the love poems. They're so passionate and intense that they'll make you blush. Just take a look at this one. It compares the beloved's eyes to the rays of the morning sun. Talk about a sunrise. Now you might be thinking, what does any of this have to do with me? Well, more than you might think. You see, the Rigveda wasn't just a book for the ancient Indians. It was a way of seeing the world. It taught them about the balance of nature and the importance of living in harmony with it. It showed them that the world was full of wonder and that they were an important part of it. And here's the best part. It didn't matter if you were a king or a peasant, a man or a woman, everyone could recite these hymns. It created a sense of unity among the people. It reminded them that, no matter their differences, they were all connected by something bigger than themselves. The Rigveda also had a huge influence on other religions. Many of the gods and goddesses mentioned in the Rigveda later became part of other faiths. For example, the Rigveda talks about a god named Rudra, who was originally the god of storms. But as time went on, he became Shiva, the destroyer in Hinduism. Over the centuries, people added their own stories and beliefs to the Rigveda. This made it more complex, and some might argue, more interesting, but it also led to a lot of confusion. Some people started claiming that the Rigveda was incomplete without these stories. But here's the thing, the Rigveda was never meant to be finished. It was always meant to evolve. You see, the Rigveda is more than just a collection of poems. It's a conversation between humans and nature, between the past and the present, between the individual and the universe. So yeah, it's pretty vast. But here's the real reason why the Rigveda feels so vast. It is not the story of one voice, but the echo of many voices woven into one. When the tribes sang together, every man and woman felt they were more than individuals. They were part of a chain, a stream that flowed beyond their lifetime. The Rigveda did not belong to one person. It belonged to all. And because of that, it has outlived empires, wars, and centuries. Even today, when we read or hear its hymns, we can still sense the power of that chorus. The voices of thousands long gone, still whispering, "We are here, we are together, and our song will never fade." And that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this journey through the Rigveda, the world's first epic poem. If you did, please hit that like button. It really helps me create more videos like this. Also, don't forget to subscribe. I have a lot more exciting stories to share with you. We often imagine ancient people as living very different lives than we do now. We think of them as very different from us. Maybe we picture ancient Egyptians as pharaohs and priests and slaves building pyramids and tombs. Or maybe we picture ancient Greeks as topless men running around in the hot sun, wrestling each other and arguing about philosophy. But no matter how exotic and dramatic we think ancient civilizations were, we still tend to think of them as pretty far removed from us. We think of them as living long ago and far away. But what if ancient people weren't all that different from us? What if they lived lives that had a lot more in common with ours than we might expect? That's what we'll be exploring today. The Rigveda is the oldest of the 4 sacred texts of Hinduism. It was compiled sometime before 800 BCE, so it predates Plato and the building of the Great Wall of China. The text consists of 1,028 hymns, which are grouped into 10 books, or mandalas. Each hymn is a poem addressed to a deity. So you can think of the Rigveda as a sort of ancient poetry slam, where the poets are trying to win over the favor of the gods. There are 33 individual gods named in the Rigveda, but they aren't all treated equally. Some are minor deities associated with particular places or activities, while others are major gods who control the forces of nature. The most important god is probably the sky god Dyaspida, who presides over the heavens along with his wife, the earth goddess Prithivi. Together they form the cosmos. The Rigveda also features 2 other powerful male gods. One is the god Agni, whose name literally means fire. He's usually depicted as a kind of intermediary between humanity and the other gods. Since fire can both nourish and destroy, he's associated with both domestic hearths and destructive lightning bolts. The other important god is the storm god Indra, who leads the other gods to battle. With his allies, he fights against the demons, giants, and dragons, called asuras, who try to bring chaos to the world. Now, the Rigveda is filled with gods and demons and epic battles between them. But despite all this fantastic, almost mythical-sounding imagery, the hymns were never far from the everyday concerns of the Aryan people who composed them. Though many scholars believe the Rigveda is a religious text, it wasn't really a religious text in the way we might think of one. At its core, the hymns were not sung only for the heavens. They were sung for survival. The Aryans were nomads who herded cattle, sowed seeds, roamed across grasslands and deserts. Every day they faced hunger, storms, disease, and war. So when the Rigveda was chanted, what they asked for was not abstract salvation, but things simple and urgent: rain in its season, fields that yield grain, cattle that multiply victory over their enemies. And yet they did not voice these desires in plain speech. They clothed them in myth. They transformed daily needs into cosmic battles. Let's take a look at some examples. In National Geographic, there's an article about the Rigveda that says, when the Indo-European speaking Aryans entered the Indian subcontinent around 2000 BCE, they encountered settled agricultural communities and took up farming. They quickly developed a reverence for rain, which they believed was controlled by the sky god Dyaspida. So you have this nomadic group coming into India, and they're meeting people who live more settled lives. They're like, whoa, those guys are onto something. They're growing crops and raising livestock. This whole settling down thing isn't so bad. But the Aryans brought their own gods with them. One of those gods was particularly relevant to their new lifestyle. The sky god, Dyaspida, was supposed to send rain, which would help the crops grow, and the cattle could eat the crops and thrive. And this was obviously of vital importance to the Aryans, because without reliable rains, their crops would fail and they'd have to wander off again, becoming nomads once more. But Dyaspida wasn't known for being super helpful. He was kind of a jerk, actually. In fact, in the Rigveda, he's scolded for withholding rain. For too long, it's like, hey Zeus, we need some rain here. The crops are dying and everyone's hungry. Please, send the rain. And Zeus is like, whatever. You guys think I have nothing better to do. So the Aryans prayed and sang to him anyway, until finally he relented and sent the rain. In another hymn, they praised the god Agni for protecting their settlements and driving away darkness. In Book 7, Hymn 104, they sang, Agni, when you enter our village, O God, you banish all our sins as one who drives away 100 cows or more. You are the purifier of all, the king of all, the lord of all, the chief of all. So Agni was associated with both the hearth and with lightning, and he could either bring warmth and light or destruction. The Aryans needed both, and they needed both in moderation. They couldn't survive without fire, but too much fire would burn down their homes and fields. Another god they adopted was the storm god Indra, who helped them in their battles against other nomadic groups and local settled populations. The Rigveda tells stories of how Indra led the Aryans to victory in battle, aided them in their wars, and helped them defeat their enemies. In Book 11, Hymn 18, the poet sings, Indra, you have gained us many earthly possessions, much wealth, much cattle, much glory, much renown. Our foe, who came against us full of arrogance, lies low like a conquered horse. grant us your blessings." Now, the Aryans weren't necessarily peaceful people, but even they knew that war wasn't a great way to get your calories. They didn't want to fight all the time, so they had faith in Indra to help them win their battles decisively, so they wouldn't have to waste precious resources on endless conflicts. You'll notice that none of the gods mentioned so far have anything to do with death. The Aryans did have beliefs about what happened after you died, but those beliefs weren't part of the Rigveda. Instead, the hymns were all about making life just a little less terrible. And that's something we can all relate to, right? Whether you're living in ancient India or modern New York City, it's always nice to have a god on your side who can take care of you when things get rough. The Rigveda was never meant to be read by scholars in comfortable armchairs. It was a text meant to be chanted by common people as they faced the challenges of everyday life. They wanted rain, so they sang to Deus Spita. They needed a fire to cook their food and keep them warm, so they praised Agni. They went to war, so they called on Indra to lead them to victory. The gods might have been larger than life, but their concerns were decidedly human. So were the ancient Aryans, that different from us after all. Oh, yes and no. Obviously, they lived in a completely different time and place, and we know very little about them. But the Rigveda suggests that their concerns were a lot more universal than we might think. They wanted the same things we wanted: a comfortable life, good food, safety, and prosperity. The difference is that they expressed those wants through epic poetry, assigned them to larger-than-life figures that we can only dream of today. We don't have any gods we can call on to solve our problems, but maybe we should start writing some hymns. Just for fun, though, let's say we did have a god who could help us with everything we needed. What would that god be like? Let me know in the comments below. And speaking of gods, if you enjoyed this episode, then I have some great news. My podcast, The History of Hell, just released a new episode on the God of Knowledge and Wisdom. This is the story of how humans used to pray. In the beginning, people didn't know what to do with their problems. They had no one to turn to, no savior to call upon, no superhero to reach out to, so they figured it out for themselves. If they wanted something, they went after it. If they needed help, they did everything they could to get it, but that wasn't easy. Sometimes they'd forget about their issues or become too afraid to solve them, so they created someone to take care of it for them. And this someone was called God. The idea of God was a simple one. Someone greater than humans who could swoop in and save the day. This was much easier than trying to figure it all out for yourself, so people loved it. But then they started to want more. At first, they only asked for the basics: food, shelter, safety, health. Then they started asking for bigger things: victory in battle, prosperity, long life. And then eventually, they wanted everything. One time they were having trouble keeping warm at night. So they cried out to God and said, "Hey, we're freezing out here. Can you make a fire?" God reached down from the heavens and ignited the forest. The humans rejoiced. It was so warm by the fire. They roasted meat and drank hot cider. The cold couldn't touch them. But when the sun came up, the fire died out and the humans froze again. So they cried out to God and said, "Hey, don't let the fire go out. Please keep it burning." And God reached down from the heavens and created the sun. The humans rejoiced. Finally, they could live normal lives without freezing to death. Then one day, some humans were walking through the woods and they got lost. So they cried out to God and said, "Hey, we're lost. Can you show us the way home?" And God reached down from the heavens and created the stars. The humans rejoiced. Now they would never be lost again. So you can see how grateful these humans were. They loved God for everything He did for them. They built huge statues in His image and made countless sacrifices to Him. They sang songs and told stories about His greatness. They named their children after Him. Their whole world revolved around Him. But after a while, they started to change, started to complain. At first, they were grateful for every little thing, but now they expected it. They thought they deserved it. They felt entitled to God's favor. They demanded that He do more for them and punish those who stood against them. So they started to ask for bigger things. One time they were dying of thirst, so they cried out to God and said, "Hey, there's not a drop of water anywhere. Can you bring us some rain?" And God reached down from the heavens and summoned the clouds. Humans rejoiced. It poured and poured until the land was saturated. The animals drank, the plants grew, the crops flourished, the people prospered. But then it rained too much, and the fields were flooded, and the houses were destroyed, and the people panicked. So they cried out to God and said, "Hey, the rains are destroying us. Can you stop it?" And God reached down from the heavens and unleashed the winds. The humans rejoiced. The winds dried up the land, and the floods receded, and the people survived. And then the humans saw something amazing. All around them were the remains of huge dragons, mountains of jewels, vast bodies of water, trees full of fruit. The humans had never seen anything like it before. They had never dreamed of such power. Then one human approached the rest and said, "We can't keep doing this. We can't keep begging God for help. We need to take matters into our own hands." The other humans agreed. They were tired of being helpless. They wanted to be strong. They wanted to be independent. They wanted to be self-sufficient. They took all the knowledge and tools they learned from God and used them to improve their lives. They developed new technologies, invented new strategies, created new systems. They built better homes, grew more food, explored new lands, conquered new enemies. They became more prosperous, more powerful, more civilized. But then they started to forget about God. They stopped praying to Him. They stopped sacrificing to Him, stopped listening to Him. They didn't want to hear His message anymore. They thought they were too smart for that, thought they were too advanced for that. They thought they were too busy for that. And one day they were having trouble keeping warm at night. So they huddled around a small fire and complained about how difficult life was. Then one wise man spoke up and said, "You know, we used to have a God who would take care of us. He would send us rain and fire and light. He would guide us through the darkness and protect us from harm. He would bless us with prosperity and shield us from disaster. We were so grateful back then. We used to sing songs of praise to Him. We used to tell stories of His glory. We used to name our children after Him. But now look at us. We've forgotten about Him. We've abandoned Him. We've denied Him. And now we suffer because of it. If only we had listened to Him. If only we had followed Him. If only we had loved Him. We wouldn't be in this mess right now." And the other humans nodded. They knew he was right. They missed God. They wanted Him back. They begged Him to come back. But God didn't come back. He was gone. He didn't want to come back. He didn't want to rule over ungrateful people. He didn't want to be a God who was taken for granted. He wanted to be a God who was worshipped. And that's why they started to pray. At first they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to reach Him. But then they remembered what it was like before. They remembered how it felt to be helpless. They remembered how it sounded to cry out for help. They remembered how it tasted to receive His blessings. So they tried again. They tried to recapture the feeling. They tried to relive the experience. They tried to recreate the magic. When they longed for rain, they did not simply pray, "Give us water." They sang, "Indra, wielder of the thunderbolt, strike down the dragon Vritra. Split open his coils so the rivers may flow, so the thirsty earth may drink." A storm became a divine war. Each rainfall a victory of thunder over serpent. When they needed fire to endure the night, they did not say, "Keep the flames alive." They sang, "Agni, companion of men, light in the darkness, bearer of our offerings to the banquet of the gods." The hearth became a living messenger, a sacred bridge between mortals and immortals. This is the story of how humans learned to pray. This is the story of how humans changed God. This is the story of how humans became human. When they first came to India, they were a small tribe of warriors from Central Asia. But within 2 centuries, they had conquered most of northern India. They created a vast empire that stretched from Afghanistan to the Bay of Bengal. And they established a dynasty that ruled over much of the Indian subcontinent for 200 years. Their leader was a warlord named Chandragupta Maurya. He was ambitious, ruthless, and brilliant. His empire would have been remembered as one of the greatest achievements of ancient history. But after Chandragupta's death, his empire collapsed, and the dynasty ended with the assassination of its 3rd ruler. But why? Why did this great empire collapse so soon? Why do great empires fall? Hello and welcome to this channel. This is a story about an empire that was built with a sword and destroyed by a pen. Our story begins with a group of people called Aryans. The word Aryan itself means noble or honorable. They were a tribal group of warriors who herded their cattle across the vast grasslands of Central Asia. But around 1500 BC, driven by population pressure and the desire for more land, they began migrating south into India. At that time, India was inhabited by indigenous people called Dasas, and when the Aryans arrived, they found themselves at war with them. The Aryans fought rival tribes for land, cattle, and water. These battles were not just clashes for resources, they were fights for survival. The Aryans had to conquer new lands if they wanted to survive. And since they had no king to lead them, each war was led by the most powerful warrior of the tribe, a man called Rajan, which means king in Sanskrit. But even though these battles were fought by men, they were attributed to gods. The Aryans believed that when they went to war, they weren't alone. Their war cries echoed the roar of mythical beasts. Their swords were guided by the hand of gods. The Aryans worshipped a pantheon of gods. There was Varuna, the god of truth and order. There was Agni, the god of fire and light. And there was Indra, the god of rain, thunder, and lightning. In the Rigveda, which is a collection of Vedic hymns, there are 200 hymns dedicated to Indra alone. The Rigveda was more than a religious text. It was a book of incantations, spells, and charms, and in war the hymns turned into a roar of battle. The Aryans fought rival tribes for land, cattle, and water. In those moments, the Rigveda became a weapon of words. Indra, ride before us. Shatter the camp of our foes. Let your thunderbolt crush their chariots. Every warrior believed he was not alone. Behind his sword was the hand of Indra. Each arrow loosed carried the force of lightning. Thus war was not only a struggle for survival, it became part of the epic struggle of gods. Victory was not just spoils of land or cattle, it was divine approval, written in thunder and blood. Over generations, the Aryan tribes consolidated their power and expanded into the fertile plains of the Gangetic Valley. By 600 BC, they defeated the kingdom of Kashi and annexed it into their empire. Then they marched south into the Deccan Plateau. By 400 BC, they controlled the most fertile regions of India. And although the kingdoms rose and fell, the civilization endured. The Aryans were not the first to establish a kingdom in India. The Indus Valley civilization had cities, infrastructure, and social organization. But their way of life collapsed 1,800 years before the Aryan invasion. In fact, several civilizations rose and fell during the Aryan conquests. But their way of life not only survived, it thrived. Why? How did the Aryan way of life endure for so long? We don't know much about them because they didn't leave behind any written records. But scholars say the Aryans were probably not a race, but a culture. They brought with them a culture that was fluid, flexible, and inclusive. For example, as the Aryans moved south, they encountered different languages, customs, and beliefs. Instead of destroying them, they absorbed them. Many of the Hindu gods today were actually part of the local cults. They were given Sanskrit names and absorbed into the Aryan pantheon. This cultural flexibility helped them rule over such a diverse land. In fact, historians believe the Aryan kings not only tolerated other religions, they actively participated in them. For example, one of the most important Hindu rituals is the Ashwamedha Yaga. It is mentioned in the Rigveda and later epics like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana. The Ashwamedha Yaga required the sacrifice of a horse and was usually performed to celebrate a king's victory. Today, it's a symbolic ritual. But originally, it was a religious ceremony sanctioned by the state, so we can say the ancient kings were not just religious leaders, they were also political ones. This brings us to the Mauryan Empire. Chandragupta Maurya founded it in 322 BC. His empire stretched from Afghanistan to the Bay of Bengal. It included parts of modern Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. We don't know much about Chandragupta's early life, but we know a lot about his empire. Historians say it was the first empire to unify the Indian subcontinent. It set precedents in administration, law, and governance that future empires emulated. Chandragupta divided his empire into provinces, districts, and subdistricts. Each province was headed by a governor who was assisted by a council of ministers. They collected taxes, maintained law and order, and implemented the king's policies. And although there were some local variations, the system worked seamlessly across the empire. In fact, this administrative efficiency made the empire invincible from the outside. No invading army could challenge it because no external force could match its military strength. Chandragupta's army was unmatched in South Asia. He inherited a well-trained army from his predecessors. They used cavalry charges to great effect. They employed archers and slingers to weaken their opponents. They even used aerial troops to sow terror in enemy ranks. This military organization made Chandragupta invincible in war. campaigned all over India and never lost a battle. He defeated the Nandas, annexed Taxila, and incorporated Gandhara into his empire, crushed rebellions and put down uprisings. In 3 decades, he increased the size of his empire and wealth. But as empires grow, they become more complex. More people pay taxes, more officials dispense justice, and more subjects need protection. And the bigger the empire, the more resources it needs to run. So Chandragupta introduced a uniform system of weights and measures. He also introduced a gold coin that circulated all over his empire. And to protect his vast domains, he built a series of fortresses. Some of these forts still stand in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Most of his building projects were designed to improve the lives of his subjects. He built rest houses along major roads, and he dug irrigation canals to water farmlands. He reformed local administration and appointed committees to oversee village affairs. In short, Chandragupta was a visionary ruler. He might have been a tyrant too, according to some accounts. He executed a Brahmin for criticizing him, chained his son to a chariot like a horse, and whipped him as he pulled the chariot. But then again, these stories might be propaganda. After all, these accounts come from his enemies. So Chandragupta's legacy is a mix of the good, the bad, and the ugly. After him, his son Bindusara took the throne. He continued his father's policies and expanded trade relations with Central Asia. But when he died, the empire was plunged into civil war. His son, the last and perhaps the most infamous Mauryan emperor, came to power in 273 BC. Like his father, he was ambitious, ruthless, and brilliant. Ashoka the Great, as he's called today, was not called that when he came to power. He was known as Piyadasi, which means the one with eyes that make you weep. He earned that name because of the brutality of his early campaigns. He fought with his father's old generals, overthrew rebel governors, and subdued defiant kingdoms. One of his generals told him, "Everywhere you go, there is lamentation." Hence the name Piyadasi. By the end of his reign, Ashoka had reunited the empire. He held Kalinga in modern-day Orissa. He pushed the boundaries of the empire into what is now Bangladesh, and he also controlled parts of Afghanistan. At its greatest extent, the Mauryan Empire covered 2 million square miles. It stretched from the Hindu Kush Mountains to the Bay of Bengal. It included modern-day Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and parts of Afghanistan. Ashoka was a devout Buddhist. He converted after the Kalinga War, when he saw the horrors of war and the suffering of the people. After embracing Buddhism, Ashoka embarked on a mission to spread it all over his empire and beyond. He sent missionaries to Sri Lanka, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. He built stupas and pillars and ordained monks. And wherever he went, he emphasized nonviolence, compassion, and tolerance. In fact, one of his edicts says, "Let not gain or advantage or profit, or even life itself be sought after at the cost of another's life." This emphasis on morality may have contributed to the empire's downfall. Ashoka was succeeded by his son Kunadana. He was weak, ineffective, and unpopular. He alienated the Brahmins and antagonized the officials. Soon, the empire began disintegrating. Governors declared independence, and provincial assemblies revolted. Within 50 years, the Mauryan Empire ceased to exist. Why did it fall apart? Perhaps the Mauryan kings were too tolerant. Perhaps their administrative system was too centralized. Or maybe their subjects simply didn't identify with a foreign king who lived thousands of miles away. Whatever the reason, the Mauryan kingship proves that empires don't always fall because of internal decay. Sometimes they're toppled by external forces. You see, while the Mauryans were busy spreading their empire, they neglected their borders. The nomadic Xiongnu tribes from Central Asia exploited their carelessness. They raided their western provinces and destabilized their northern frontiers. It was a classic case of hubris. Just as the Mauryans were about to complete the conquest of India, the Xiongnu brought them back to reality. They taught Ashoka and his successors a valuable lesson. Sometimes a little war is necessary to hold an empire together. When we hear the word Veda, the first thing that comes to our mind is ancient lore, mysterious incantations, rituals and ceremonies, rishis and muni, yoga and meditation. But what if I were to tell you there's more? What if I were to tell you that the Vedas had something else in their ambit, the ordinary business of life? You may be wondering how. How can something as commonplace as daily life have anything to do with the divine? How can things like eating, drinking, sleeping, and farming be related to the Vedas? Today we are going to look at the Rigveda in its entirety and explore what aspects of daily life are covered by it. We are going to try to understand how the seers of the Rigveda conceptualize the idea of the divine. What they did was truly revolutionary. What they achieved is nothing short of extraordinary. They did not keep the sacred separate from the ordinary. They wove them together. A meal was also an offering. A seed was also a gift to the gods. A cow was both livestock and a symbol of wealth and holiness. They raised every need, every hope into the cosmic. They transformed the mundane into mythic language. The main deity of the Rigveda is Indra. He is mentioned 253 times. There are many hymns addressed to him. In fact, the first and the last hymns of the Rigveda are addressed to him. Now, why would a supreme god like him care about the simple day-to-day problems of human beings? You find the answer in this beautiful hymn addressed to Indra. This hymn reveals the secret of the Vedic worldview. Listen to these words. These words are not just a part of this hymn, no. These words are a key to the entire Rigveda. Let me repeat, the seer says. Indra, you are the flavor in the mouth. Now you may ask, what does that mean? When you eat food, when you drink water, when you sleep after a hard day's work, when you feel refreshed, when you wake up full of energy, when you walk out into the sun, all these experiences, all these feelings, all these sensations are expressions of the divine. If you want to know what a person thought about his or her existence, what he or she felt about life, then one has to look at the details, minute details. And those details are provided by the Rigveda. What do you think they would have prayed for? For rain, for fertility, for prosperity, for victory over their enemies? Ordinary things, very much like us. Now let us look at some of the domestic deities of the Rigveda. The earth is called Prithvi. She is a mother figure. She provides sustenance, food, land, shelter, and most important of all, she listens patiently. When you fall down, when you hurt yourself, when you cry out in pain, she remains a silent witness. You don't have to make offerings to her, just be born. That itself is an offering to the earth. You don't have to pray to her, just live your life. That itself is a prayer to the earth. She is generous beyond measure. She offers her bounty to all. It doesn't matter whether you are good or bad, whether you are honest or deceitful, whether you are kind or cruel. The earth offers her blessings to all. She does not ask for anything in return. She does not hold a grudge. She does not discriminate. She is a mother. Yeah. Then there is the sky, which is called Diya Vaprakush. The sky is vast, limitless. It is full of wonders. It is ever new. It does not change. Yet it seems to be changing because our moods change. When the sky is cloudless, when it is bright and sunny, then the sky is male. It is called divas. When the sky is overcast, when it rains, when it thunders, when it is dark and gloomy, then the sky is female. It is called nox. And when night follows day, when darkness follows brightness, they embrace each other. Now, do you see why the sky is considered a god? Because it provides day and night without which life cannot exist. Because it gives us light and darkness which define our lives. Because it rains and waters the earth which makes life possible. It is a giver of life. Okay, it gives you everything you need, even though you never thank it, even though you never pray to it. And what about the winds? They too are gods. They travel all over the world. They carry messages. They bring news. They are messengers. They race through the skies. They rush through the trees. Oh, they rustle through the leaves. And as they move around, they bring about changes. They make flowers bloom. They make plants grow. They ripen fruits. They swell the rivers. They fill the lakes and the oceans. They stir up the sea. They lash the shore. They push the clouds across the sky. They make the rains fall. They spread the fragrance of flowers. They spread the aroma of food. Without air, life cannot exist. Without the winds, the earth will be a graveyard. Every natural phenomenon was a manifestation of the divine. Everything was permeated by the divine. So the Vedic seers did not draw a sharp line between the sacred and the ordinary. They celebrated the sacredness of the ordinary. Every natural phenomenon was a source of wonder. Every season had its own beauty. Every plant had medicinal properties. Every tree had a special value. Every river had a unique quality. Every mountain was majestic and awe-inspiring. Nature was a temple. The earth was a prayer. Life itself was a sacrifice. There is a very interesting hymn in the Rigveda. In this hymn, the seer lists all the gifts that the earth has given to human beings. Listen to this. The earth has produced plants, herbs, fruits, trees, roots, honey, sugarcane, and sweet juices, oil, cake, and ghee, milk and butter, flesh and blood and urine. May we receive our due share from the kindly earth. Whatever we may desire, may that be ours. The Rigveda celebrates the richness of life. It celebrates the bounty of nature. It rejoices at the diversity of the earth. Soma is another very important deity. Who is Soma? It is not a personal god. It is a drink made from a special plant. It is said to have magical powers. It gives immortality. It confers heaven. The secret of making this drink was known only to a few. They were called Sommeliers. Making Soma was a ritual in itself. It was performed in a special way. It was offered to the gods, and the seers drank it, and then they saw visions. They experienced the divine. They came back and told the others what they had seen and experienced. Do you see why this was such a powerful experience? Think about this. You are sitting in a forest. All around you are trees. Some are tall, some are short. Some have broad leaves, some have pointed leaves. Some have long branches, some have short branches. But do you see anything beyond this variety? Can you see any unity? Can you see any pattern? Can you discover any law that governs all of them? The Vedic seers did. They went beyond the diversity and discovered the unity. They went beyond the variety and found the common thread that bound all the trees together. They found the universal law. They realized that all trees have one thing in common. They all grow from seeds. And so the seers formulated the law of sowing and reaping. They learned that every action had a reaction. They understood the law of cause and effect. They formulated this law based on their observations. It is called aparigraha, non-stealing, because it prevents you from reaping where you have not sown. It is called asteya, non-violence, because it prevents you from destroying where you have not created. It is called satya, truth, because it compels you to face the consequences of your actions. It is called ahimsa, non-stealing, because it forces you to live with the results of your behavior. This is the genius of the Vedas. It is not confined to the esoteric. It is not limited to rituals and ceremonies. It covers the entire gamut of human experience. The Vedas teach you to live your life fully and totally, in every moment, in every breath. They teach you to celebrate life. They teach you to rejoice in existence. They teach you to be one with the universe. So the next time you take a deep breath, remember you are breathing in the very essence of the Vedas. The next time you look up at the sky, remember you are looking at the very source of the Vedas. The next time you feel the warmth of the sun on your skin, remember you are feeling the very touch of the Vedas. The next time you taste food, remember you are tasting the very flavor of the Vedas. And the next time you look at a tree, remember you are seeing the very symbol of the Vedas. So this video is going to be a little different from my normal videos, but I am really excited to share it, because it's been a dream of mine for years to study abroad in India and learn Sanskrit firsthand from Indian teachers. Well, that dream came true this summer when I spent 3 months in Rishikesh, which is considered to be the spiritual capital of the world. I studied Sanskrit, yoga, Ayurveda, and Hinduism, visited holy sites, and most importantly, I got to interview several amazing Sanskrit teachers and scholars about the ancient roots of yoga and Ayurveda, 2 topics which I'm absolutely fascinated by. In one of my interviews, my teacher asked me what I thought was the secret behind the Rigveda's survival through millennia, because the Rigveda is the oldest scripture still being used today in its original language, Sanskrit. And at first I thought the answer was obvious. Perhaps that is why the Rigveda endured through millennia, because humans will always need myth to explain what they do not understand. But they will also always need rain, food, safety, and victory. The Rigveda bound both together, was at once sacred hymn and earthly prayer. And even today, when we listen to those ancient verses, we hear not only the voices of gods, but the cries of ordinary people, hungry, hopeful, trembling, alive. As I continued my studies, I started to notice everywhere around me evidence of the Rigvedic influence. For example, when I was doing yoga, sometimes my teacher would say, when you're breathing, imagine you're smelling the flowers, breathing in, smelling the flowers. When you breathe out, you're releasing all tension. I thought, wow, this is very similar to one of the oldest meditations in the Rigveda. The other day, I was getting a massage from my neighbor, and I was reflecting on how Ayurveda, which is the traditional Indian system of medicine, has influenced the massage techniques and how those techniques were described in the ancient texts. So I asked her if she knew that there's a very famous Ayurvedic massage called Uddarana, which means to release or to elevate. And she said, "Oh yeah, this is my favorite massage. What do you know about it?" I told her everything I had learned from my Ayurvedic teacher. She was so happy to hear it. And we talked for hours about the history of UJ massage and how lucky we are to be able to practice it today. It dawned on me that the Rigveda itself could be an Uddarana, a way to release and elevate our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. This is what I want to talk about today, how the Rigveda is an Uddarana. It's a way to release and elevate our lives, how we can use the power of mantra and meditation to transform ourselves. Now, I've already made a few videos explaining some of the most powerful mantras of the Rigveda. You can check them out if you're interested. But here I want to go deeper and talk about the transformative power of these ancient verses, and how we can use them to heal and grow. There's a beautiful story about the Rigveda that I love. It's said that once upon a time in ancient India there was a terrible drought. The crops were failing, the rivers were drying up, and the people were starving. In their desperation, they went to the sage Vashishta and asked him to save them. Vashishta told them that the only way to end the drought was to bring the rain god Indra down from heaven. But the people didn't know how to do that. So Vashishta took them to a nearby lake, made them sit down, and started to chant the Rigveda. As he chanted, the lake began to fill with water, and soon it overflowed, turning into a mighty river. Then Vashishta raised his hands toward heaven and shouted, "Indra, come down and save us." And just like that, the rain god heard their call and brought down a torrential rain that lasted for 40 days and 40 nights. The land was flooded, and the people rejoiced. This story shows us the incredible power of the Rigveda. It can bring down the rain god himself. It can turn a small lake into a life-giving river. It can bring life to barren land. And most importantly, it can transform the lives of ordinary people. But what makes the Rigveda so powerful? What is it about these ancient verses that makes them so effective? I believe it's their ability to connect us with something bigger than ourselves. Rigveda takes us beyond our limited human perspective and opens our eyes to the divine reality that surrounds us. It reminds us that we are not alone in this world. We are part of a vast cosmic order that has been unfolding for billions of years. We have the ability to tap into that order, to harness its power for our own transformation. We live in a time when many of us feel lost and disconnected. We have all the technology and conveniences of modern life, but we also have unprecedented levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. We are bombarded with information from all sides, and we have a hard time finding meaning and purpose in our lives. That's where the Rigveda can help us. It can reconnect us with the rhythms of nature, with the cycles of birth and death and rebirth. It can remind us of our place in the web of life, and it can show us how to live in harmony with the natural world around us. The Rigveda is not just a collection of ancient verses. It's a living tradition that has the power to transform our lives. It can bring light into darkness. It can heal our wounds, and it can set us free. So how can we use the Rigveda to transform our lives? First, we need to approach it with an open mind and a pure heart. We must be willing to let go of our ego and our preconceptions and to surrender to the wisdom of the ancients. Second, we need to immerse ourselves in the text and memorize as many verses as possible. The more we chant, the more we internalize the teachings of the Rigveda. Third, we must put these teachings into practice in our daily lives. We must strive to live according to the values and principles of the Rigveda and to make it a part of our daily routine. By following these steps, we can experience the profound wisdom and transformative power of the Rigveda in our own lives. The Rigveda is more than just a religious text. It's a source of wisdom and inspiration for all of humanity. Its teachings are timeless and universal, and they can help us to create a better future for ourselves and for generations to come. Whether we are facing drought or depression, war or famine, the Rigveda has the answers we need to overcome our challenges and to live more fulfilling lives. We live in a world that often seems chaotic and unpredictable, but the Rigveda reminds us that there is a divine order that governs the universe. If we tune into that order, if we align ourselves with the rhythms of nature and the cycles of life, we can find peace and happiness no matter what external circumstances we may be facing. My journey to Rishikesh was a life-changing experience. It allowed me to deepen my understanding and appreciation for the ancient traditions of India, and to see firsthand the practical applications of Vedic wisdom in daily life. I am so grateful for the opportunity to have studied under the guidance of local teachers and to have immersed myself in the spiritual atmosphere of the yoga capital of the world. Upon returning home, I feel inspired to share what I have learned with others and to continue practicing yoga, Ayurveda, and the teachings of the Rigveda in my own life. I hope that my enthusiasm for these ancient traditions is contagious and that others will be inspired to explore them for themselves. Whether you are a long-time practitioner or a curious beginner, I encourage you to embrace the transformative power of yoga, Ayurveda, and the Vedas, and to see how they can enrich your life. And if you have the opportunity to travel to India, I highly recommend it. It is a land of ancient wisdom and spiritual depth, and I am so glad to have experienced it firsthand. Thank you all for your support and for being a part of my journey. I look forward to continuing to share my experiences and insights with you, and I hope that they will inspire you on your own path of self-discovery and transformation. Namaskar. Do you see how it burns low now? The fire where the embers glow faintly and crack in the night? Yet do you hear even now the song of the Rigveda? Do you hear it even in the silence? Can you hear what we are saying? What we're telling you is that the Rigveda is not just praise for the gods. The Rigveda is also the voice of humanity, humanity facing the cosmos. Yes. There's crackling of the fire. Listen closely, and you will hear the song. Not only in your ears, but in your heart. The song of the Rigveda is eternal, because it's the voice of modern man and woman. We too are those ancient humans looking up at the same stars, feeling the same earth beneath our feet, living with the same joys and sorrows. Because the Rigveda, after all, was never just praise for the gods. It was the voice of humanity facing the cosmos, a voice trembling with fear, burning with wonder, aching with desire. Haunted by doubt, like you and me? It is said that the Rigveda is the oldest extant scripture of mankind, which means surviving till today. It is said to have been compiled around 1000 BCE, making it more than 3,000 years old. This is a difficult estimate to defend, given that the process of oral transmission that produced the final form of the Rigveda must have taken several centuries. So let's say it took about 500 years to put together the 1028 hymns of the Rigveda, which is nothing short of a miracle. The Rigveda is the oldest miracle of mankind. Here is something else that might sound like a miracle. There are about 10,000 words in the Rigveda. It may not sound like much, especially if you are accustomed to reading lengthy novels or watching long movies. But when you consider that each word in the Rigveda is the result of the effort of one person speaking and another listening over many generations, the scale of the task seems almost overwhelming. To think that this entire body of work survived for thousands of years, despite multiple natural and man-made disasters, and that too in a form that is virtually identical to its original, is truly amazing. Why did ancient Indians take such pains to preserve this text? Why was it so important for them? That was a very good question. Let's try to answer that. The Rigveda tells the story of creation. Its first hymn celebrates the birth of the universe out of a union between darkness and non-being. There is no mention of a creator god. Instead, the hymn speaks of spontaneous generation, an idea that prevailed widely in ancient India. This first hymn shows that ancient Indians were philosophical about the origin of the universe. They were interested in exploring questions about existence. This is evident in other parts of the Rigveda as well. For instance, the Rigveda wonders aloud why night follows day and day follows night. It talks about the journey of the sun across the sky. It explains death as separation of the soul from the body. It describes the churning of the cosmic ocean by the gods and demons to obtain the elixir of immortality. In these and many other hymns, the Rigveda reveals a people deeply concerned with understanding their world, both inside and out. Let's look more closely at some of these hymns. One of the most famous hymns in the Rigveda is dedicated to the sun, asking him why he travels across the sky every day. He does it so that men can follow his path and know day from night. Another hymn asks why the night follows day and day follows night. The answer is simple. Night is the twin sister of day. Together they rule the world. Here is another hymn. It talks about the journey of the sun across the sky and the joy and prosperity it brings. A little later, another hymn speaks of death as a separation of the soul from the body. It says, when a man is born, the father weeps and the mother rocks the cradle. Why do you weep, father? The son has come to his own. This vessel has been broken. Another has been found. Interesting. Another hymn speaks of how the gods churned the cosmic ocean with the help of a serpent and a mountain. They churned the ocean to obtain the nectar of immortality. This nectar was meant for the devas, the bright ones, but the asuras, the dark ones, drank it up. So the gods had to fight the demons for immortality, such as the story of the churning of the sea. These hymns show that ancient Indians were deeply concerned with understanding their world. They were also intensely curious about everything around them. They wanted to know how things worked, why things happened, what lay beyond life. These are universal human questions. We see that the Rigveda was not afraid to address them. It grappled with them. It questioned, explored, experimented. It discovered, debated, shared, refined, and systematized. All this through poetry, through 10,000 or so magical words, which, like seeds, gave rise to a civilization. So you see, it's not surprising that this unique body of knowledge was preserved so carefully. It was not just a collection of religious texts. It was a foundation on which a culture was built. Ancient Indians performed elaborate rituals, laid down social customs and moral codes, created systems of governance. All this was done keeping in mind the lessons contained in the Rigveda. How does the Rigveda view kingship, for instance? It views it as a sacred duty, a dharma. King is expected to uphold the order of the universe. He must be just compassionate and courageous. He must rule with wisdom and protect his people. And if he fails to do any of this, he forfeits his right to rule. If he becomes tyrannical, he can be removed from power. The Rigveda contains many hymns on ideal kingship. One of the most famous hymns celebrates the coronation of a king. Another set of hymns eulogizes King Sudas, who led his people to victory against a coalition of rival kings. This hymn is especially significant because it gives us an insight into the military organization of ancient India. Here's another hymn. It talks about how the king should behave with his subjects. He must not be partial, harsh, or unjust. He must be fair in his dealings and compassionate towards the weak. Here's yet another hymn. It warns the king against becoming drunk with power. It reminds him that he too will die one day and leave behind all his wealth and possessions. As you can see, the Rigveda was not just a book of prayers and incantations. It was a repository of wisdom that helped people live their lives according to certain values and principles. The Rigveda was also a source of inspiration. It taught people to be the best version of themselves, whether they were kings or commoners, men or women. It inspired them to strive for excellence, to push the boundaries of human endeavor, and to reach new heights of achievement. You may wonder how. Well, here's an interesting example. One of the hymns in the Rigveda celebrates the goddess As, the personification of dawn. She is described as a golden-hued divine being who rides a chariot drawn by 2 horses. Her arrival ushers in the beginning of the day, and her departure heralds the coming of night. The hymn goes on to describe her various attributes and her importance in the cosmic order. This hymn is not just a celebration of nature. It is also a metaphor for the human condition. The rising and setting of the sun is a reminder of the cyclical nature of life. Just as day follows night and night follows day, life is full of ups and downs, joys and sorrows, successes and failures. But like the sun, we must rise again after every setback and face the challenges of a new day with courage and determination. This is the message that the hymn conveys. And it is a message that is as relevant today as it was 3,000 years ago. Now, it's not just the message. The language of the hymn is also remarkable. The poet has used vivid imagery and similes to create a powerful and evocative picture of the goddess. The rhythm and rhyme of the verses add to the musical quality of the hymn, making it a delight to recite and chant. This hymn is a masterpiece of Vedic poetry, and it is a testament to the poetic genius of the seers of ancient India. So you see, the Rigveda is not just a collection of ancient texts. It is a treasure trove of wisdom, inspiration, and poetic brilliance. It is a legacy that has shaped the course of human history, and it continues to inspire people today. The Rigveda is eternal because it's the voice of modern man and woman. We too are those ancient humans looking up at the same stars, feeling the same earth beneath our feet, living with the same joys and sorrows. Because the Rigveda, after all, was never just praise for the gods. It was the voice of humanity facing the cosmos, a voice trembling with fear, burning with wonder, aching with desire. Haunted by doubt like you and me. When Mahatma Gandhi returned to India after his studies in South Africa, a friend gifted him a copy of the Rigveda. He read it, he meditated on it, and when he was arrested for the first time, he sent a message to his friend asking for that book to be brought to him in prison. This is what Mahatma Gandhi said about the Rigveda. The more I study it, the more I find myself drawn to its study. It appears to me to be the very best book for a person in prison, especially for one who is serving a sentence. Its study leads to peace of mind, he added. No book can compare with the Rigveda. My experience is that if one reads the verses while trying to understand their meaning and then chants them, they lead to a state of perfect peace. The peace which is within the reach of the Rigveda is not the kind that results from a hypnotic suggestion. It comes from the discovery of eternal truths and the realization of one's oneness with the whole universe. When one realizes this, fear and worry disappear, and one is filled with courage, strength, and cheerfulness. The peace which the Rigveda brings cannot be compared with any other peace. This is my experience. It's been more than 3 millennia. Empires have fallen, wars have shifted, languages have changed, but the Rigveda endures. It endures in temples of India, where priests still chant its verses in the glow of ritual fire. It endures in libraries where scholars pore over each word, seeking meanings, old and new. It endures in us, whenever we raise our eyes to the heavens and ask, where did we come from? How did it all begin? The Rigveda reminds us. Human beings do not live by bread and water alone. We live by the hunger for meaning. And that hunger has never ceased. In today's episode, let's look at the story behind the rediscovery of the Rigveda, how it became part of our ancient tradition, and why its lessons are still so relevant today. Our story begins with a man named Vyasadeva. He lived in ancient India, but we don't know exactly when. Some say he was born in 3700 BCE, some 8000 BCE. There is no consensus. All we know for sure is that he was born in the Dwapara Yuga, the third of 4 great ages in Hindu cosmology. These ages are not meant to be taken literally. Think of them as eras or epochs in human history. In each epoch, the world changes. Societies evolve, so does human consciousness. According to our scriptures, it is during the Dwapara Yuga that the Kurush ruled the earth. They were among the most powerful kings of their time. But the Kauravas were steeped in sin. They had forgotten the ancient traditions, the ancient practices that connected people to the divine. Vyasadeva set out to change that. He wanted to remind the cursed of their heritage, their legacy. Started writing down ancient hymns and verses that were passed down to him through an unbroken chain of teachers going back millennia. Together, these hymns formed the Rigveda, one of 4 sacred texts that would later become part of the Vedas. Today, the Rigveda is the oldest of the 4. It's also the longest. It has 1028 hymns. Each hymn is divided into verses, mantras, and there are more than 10,000 of those. The Rigveda is divided into 10 books. Each book has its own theme. For example, Book 6 is dedicated to a deity named Usha, the Dawn. Here's a translation of one of her hymns. Usha, goddess of the dawn, we have seen your horses, bright of hue, drawing your golden chariot along the sky, scattering darkness all around, dispelling gloom with light. O goddess, all the regions of the earth, they wake and sing your praise. The birds awake and hail you with their songs. You are the mother of all creatures. We salute you. Do you see how every word in the Rigveda still echoes through poetry and song? Every culture expresses itself through art, and this art form is poetry. The Rigveda is poetry. There are many such hymns in the Rigveda. Many have been set to music. There are entire musical ragas based on the Rigveda. Today, the Rigveda is a source of spiritual inspiration for Hindus. It's also a key text in the study of Hinduism. But do you know the Rigveda could have been lost forever? The Vedic period lasted from 1500 BCE to 500 CE. During this time, 4 sacred texts were compiled. They're called the Vedas. That's Sanskrit for knowledge. The Vedas contain hymns, verses, prayers, philosophical insights. They're a repository of ancient Indian tradition, but the Vedas were never meant to be static. They were meant to evolve. And that evolution was spearheaded by the Acharyas, those who studied the Vedas, those who passed on their teachings. Then came the Islamic invasions. As more and more invaders entered India, the Acharyas faced a tough choice. Abandon their ancient texts or hide them. Most chose to hide them. They memorized hymns and verses and then went into hiding. This process is called Sanskritana in Sanskrit. It simply means to preserve by recitation. And for centuries, the Rigveda survived because of Sanskritana. But eventually, the invaders grew bolder. They attacked the hermitages of rishis and sages. They killed many of them. So the surviving Acharyas decided it was time to return to India. They traveled across the subcontinent, searching for ancient texts that were scattered and destroyed, collecting whatever they could find. One of these Acharyas was named Shunyak or Sukha, the son of the sage Vyasa. He traveled far and wide and finally managed to put together 8 of 10 lost books of the Rigveda. It was a Herculean task. Ancient texts were found on tree bark, on palm leaves, even on the bodies of ants. But Sukha compiled them all. He organized them, and that's how the Rigveda, as we know it today, came into being. It's a beautiful story, isn't it? The Rigveda was saved by the collective will of its people. They refused to let their ancient texts die. They saw to it that the knowledge was passed down to generation after generation. Now, this isn't just a story. It's a testament to the enduring power of our tradition, our culture, our identity. Look at the Rigveda today. It's taught in schools and colleges. It's used in religious ceremonies. The central government of India has declared the Rigveda a masterpiece of the oral. And rightly so, because this book wasn't written just with a pen. It was written with the blood, sweat, and tears of countless seers and sages. Now, you might wonder why the Rigveda is important. Why should you care about it? Well, here's why. The Rigveda is more than just a collection of ancient hymns. It's a mirror to humanity's journey through time. Reflects our deepest fears and aspirations, our darkest moments, and our greatest triumphs. Take, for example, the Rigveda's description of the cosmos. In the 10th mandala, we find a detailed account of the creation of the world. The Rigveda tells us that everything emerged from a state of infinite potentiality, a state beyond time and space. Listen to this. In the beginning, there was only darkness. There was non-being, there was no night or day. No air, no light, no sky above. There was no rain, no thunder, no wind. Nothing moved. Nothing existed. Only the one Lord pervaded all directions. And then came the gods. The Rigveda describes them as divine sparks that ignited the cosmic darkness. These sparks represented various natural phenomena like fire, water, and air. But they also represented abstract ideas like truth, love, and compassion. Together, the gods brought order and harmony to the universe. They created the world as we know it. And that's just one story. The Rigveda has many others. It tells the story of creation, yes, but it also tells the story of destruction. It speaks of a time when the gods will abandon the world, and all living beings will be plunged into darkness. But even in that darkness, the Rigveda promises there will be a flicker of hope, a single ray of light that will usher in a new age of creation. Do you see how profound these hymns are? They talk about life, death, and rebirth. They talk about our place in the universe and our relationship with the divine. So when Mahatma Gandhi said the Rigveda is the best book for a person in prison, he was right. When Mahatma Gandhi said the Rigveda brings a peace that's unmatched, he was right. When Mahatma Gandhi said the Rigveda shows the path to eternal truths, he was right. And I'll tell you what else. Mahatma Gandhi wasn't the first to discover these truths. Millennia ago, ancient Indian seers and sages experienced them for themselves. They sang and wrote about them in the Rigveda, and their words continue to inspire us today. This is an old Sanskrit text called the Rigveda. This is one of the oldest books in the world. It was written around 3,000 years ago, and yet when you read or listen to it today, it feels as though you're having a conversation with someone sitting right next to you. The Rigveda is so powerful because it captures the essence of humanity. It speaks about our deepest desires, fears, and aspirations. It talks about everything that makes us human. So let us take a journey back in time and explore what this ancient text has to teach us about life, the universe, and everything in between. The Rigveda contains 1028 hymns dedicated to various gods and goddesses. These hymns were composed by anonymous sages known as rishi, which means seer. The word rishi also means one who moves about, one who travels. These seers were not just passive observers of the world around them. They were active participants who roamed far and wide, observing nature and contemplating its mysteries. They saw patterns in the natural world and began to understand that these patterns were governed by natural laws. They realized that these laws were not arbitrary or capricious. They were the result of a divine order, so they began to worship the forces of nature as gods and goddesses. The Rigveda is divided into 10 mandalas, or books. Each mandala contains a collection of hymns that are grouped together based on a common theme. For example, the 6th mandala is dedicated to the god of thunder, while the 9th mandala contains hymns addressed to various atmospheric deities. The Rigveda was originally transmitted orally from teacher to student. It was only later that it was written down. But even when it was written down, it was still meant to be recited aloud. In fact, it was believed that the power of the hymns was enhanced when they were recited aloud. That's why when you read the Rigveda today, you get the feeling that you're listening to a conversation. The language is so conversational that it feels as though the seers are sitting right next to you. They're talking to you directly and sharing their insights about the world around them. The Rigveda contains some of the earliest known hymns addressed to particular deities. For example, the hymn "O Indra, grant us riches" is addressed to the god Indra, who is the god of rain and thunder. In another hymn, the seer addresses the goddess Usas, who is the goddess of the dawn. The Rigveda also contains hymns addressed to more abstract concepts, such as the hymn "May the Truth Protect Us." In this hymn, the seers call upon truth to protect them from harm. They recognize that truth is a powerful force that can help them navigate the complexities of life. They also understand that truth is eternal and unchanging, which gives them hope in a world that often seems chaotic and unpredictable. As you read through the Rigveda, you'll notice that many of the hymns are addressed to more than one deity. For example, in one hymn, the seer addresses both the god Agni and the goddess Savitri. In another hymn, the seer calls upon 3 deities: the sky, the atmosphere, and the earth. This reflects the ancient Indian understanding of the relationship between the physical world and the spiritual world. They believed that the physical world was a manifestation of the spiritual world, and so they sought to understand the spiritual world by studying the physical world. They saw the patterns and regularities in the natural world and began to believe that these patterns and regularities were the result of a divine order. The Rigveda is not just a collection of hymns. It also contains philosophical and ethical teachings. For example, in one hymn, the seer asks the question, "What is the purpose of life?" He reflects on the nature of suffering and the possibility of liberation from suffering. In another hymn, the seer discusses the importance of following one's dharma, or duty. He argues that when people follow their dharma, the world is in balance and everyone prospers. One of the most striking things about the Rigveda is the sheer beauty of its language. The Sanskrit language is renowned for its poetic qualities, and the Rigveda is a great example of this. The hymns are filled with vivid imagery and metaphors that evoke the natural world around them. For example, in one hymn, the seer compares the rays of the sun to horses that are pulling a chariot across the sky. In another hymn, he compares the stars to cows that are grazing in the pastures of the heavens. The Rigveda is not just beautiful to read, it's also deeply moving. The hymns express a wide range of human emotions, from joy and wonder to fear and despair. The Rigveda captures the full range of the human experience, and that's what makes it so relatable to us today. The Rigveda is still revered by Hindus today, and it is considered to be one of the 4 sacred texts of Hinduism. The other 3 texts are the Samaveda, the Yajurveda, and the Atharveda. Together, these 4 texts are known as the Vedas, which simply means knowledge. The Vedas have had a profound influence on Indian culture and society, and they continue to be studied and debated today. So why do I love the Rigveda? Why do I think it's the greatest book in the world? Because it's more than just a book. It's a conversation with the divine. It's a testament to the power of the human spirit. When you read the Rigveda, you feel connected to something larger than yourself. You realize that you are part of a long tradition of seekers who have been searching for truth and meaning since the beginning of time. As I close, I want to leave you with one final thought. The Rigveda teaches us that we are all connected. We are all part of the same cosmic family. We may come from different cultures and backgrounds, but we are all united by our common humanity. We all face the same challenges. We all yearn for the same things: love, happiness, and peace. The Rigveda reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. It gives us hope that there is a divine order to the universe, and that we can trust in that order even when we don't understand it. So I encourage you to read the Rigveda. I encourage you to listen to the hymns and let their message of hope and resilience fill your heart. As the Rigveda says, go on, go forth, and meet with no fear whatever, for the gods are with you. May the gods be with you always. And with that, we come to the end of another video. If you enjoyed this exploration of the Rigveda, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Your support means the world to us. Once upon a time, at the dawn of human civilization, 3,000 years ago in India, a group of sages had gathered. They were not satisfied with the casual and ordinary life. They wanted something extraordinary. They wanted to touch the infinite, the eternal, and know the deepest secrets of existence. And so they meditated, they contemplated, and then they began to ask questions. Oh, to be more precise, they began to answer questions. They realized that everything we see around is just the tip of an iceberg. There must be something beyond. This is how it all started. This led to the first question. Where did creation come from? How did the universe begin? And these questions sparked the beginning of the Rigveda. It is the oldest of the 4 sacred texts called Vedas in Hinduism. And the word Veda itself means knowledge or wisdom. And Rigveda means the wisdom of the hymns. These hymns are like songs. They sing the glory of the divine. They praise the cosmic order. And these hymns were composed by those sages, the Rishi. So who were these sages? Well, they were not ordinary people. They were mystics, poets, philosophers, and they saw the world in a unique way. For them, everything in nature was not just a thing. It was a manifestation of the divine. And when I say everything, I mean everything. They saw the truth in every leaf, every river, every star. To them, the whole universe was a temple filled with gods. When I say gods, remember it's not just one god, but many. And that's what makes Rigveda unique. It doesn't just focus on one god. It celebrates a whole pantheon of deities. Now, why is this important? Because it shows us the vastness of existence. It reminds us that the universe is incredibly complex, and there's so much we don't understand. So instead of trying to explain everything with one story, Rigveda invites us to explore, to wonder, and to appreciate the mystery of existence. And as we do this, we realize that we are just a small part of something much bigger. We are not the center of the universe. We are part of a cosmic dance, a cosmic play, where every star, every planet, every living being has its role. But let's get back to those questions, because they changed the course of history. You see, for many cultures, especially at that time, the idea that creation might have started somewhere or happened because of something was shocking. Back then, most people believed that the world was just always there. They never questioned how it began. They just accepted it as it was, but not the sages. They wanted to know. And their thirst for knowledge led them to discover new things about the universe and about themselves. And this discovery didn't just happen once. It was a journey, a long and winding path of exploration. For example, let's take the question of death. Death is something we all experience, or rather we will experience someday. But for a long time, people didn't really talk about it. It was a taboo subject. They feared death so much that they pretended it wasn't there. But the sages were not afraid. They faced the reality of death and asked questions. They wondered if death was the end. If so, what happens after that? And as they pondered over these questions, they came up with theories, ideas that helped people cope with the pain of losing someone they loved. These ideas became part of the Rigveda, and they have been guiding people ever since. And that's the thing about these ancient texts. They are not just stories or myths. They are filled with deep truths that are relevant even today. And when I say truths, I mean lessons that can change our lives. Like the lesson of letting go. You see, in the modern world, we often hold on to things very tightly. Our jobs, our relationships, our worries. But sometimes holding on can cause us more pain than letting go. And Rigveda teaches us the art of letting go. There are hymns that talk about how even the gods release what they can't control. They accept the natural cycle of things and move forward. This lesson has helped countless people through tough times, and it continues to guide us today. Or think about the lesson of balance. In our daily lives, it's easy to tip over and become unbalanced. We get too much of some things and too little of others. But the sages of Rigveda understood that true happiness comes from balance. The hymns in Rigveda teach us to find balance in every aspect of our lives, in our thoughts, our actions, and our emotions. This teaching is as important today as it was 3,000 years ago. In fact, you could say it is even more important now because we face more challenges and distractions than ever before. You see, the rishis were not just asking questions. They were seeking answers that could improve our lives, that could bring us peace and balance. And they found those answers in the rhythm of nature, in the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. They saw the patterns and they realized that these patterns were not just in the natural world. They were also in the human world. And so they began to apply these patterns to our lives. Take, for instance, the concept of sacrifice. And when I say sacrifice, I don't mean giving up nice things or suffering. I mean offering what you have with joy. And this teaching is all over Rigveda. The sages realized that true fulfillment comes not from taking, but from giving. They saw that when they gave, they received much more in return, not in terms of money or possessions, but in terms of peace and joy. This idea is not just a religious teaching, it's a lesson in happiness. Numerous studies show that helping others makes us happier. It gives meaning and purpose to our lives. And the sages of Rigveda knew this. They lived it thousands of years ago. Consider the lesson of devotion. You see, in this world, it's very easy to become distracted. There's so many things that pull our attention, but the sages knew the secret of staying focused. And that secret was devotion. The hymns of Rigveda are filled with stories of people who were devoted to their goals, to their dreams, and to their values. And these stories remind us that when we have devotion, when we have a strong purpose, we can overcome any obstacle. So you see, Rigveda is not just a collection of ancient texts. It is a treasure trove of life lessons. And the most important lesson of all, perhaps the greatest lesson of the Rigveda, is this: knowledge does not begin with answers, but with questions. 3,000 years ago they asked, where did creation come from? Today, scientists still search with telescopes and equations. The answers may change, but the fire of the question, the sacred flame, still burns. And when we hear the Rigveda, we are not just listening to the past. We are hearing our own voice, echoing across time, reminding us that to ask is to live. Hello everyone. Today is a special day for me, because today I get to share with you the first ever episode of a series called What the Ancients Knew. In each episode of this series, I'll be looking at some ancient texts and considering how the insights it contains can help us in the modern world. In today's episode, we're going to look at the Rigveda, one of the oldest scriptures in the world. We're going to explore what we can learn from it about asking questions. Now, if you're new here, let me explain. I'm a historian of science. I've written a few books and taught at a university. And now I make videos about history, science, and culture every week. So let's get into it. So the Rigveda is an ancient Indian text. It's a collection of 1028 hymns, poems that are set to music, and they praise various gods and goddesses. Now, these hymns were composed over a long period of time, and scholars believe that the oldest parts go back to around 1500 BCE. That makes the Rigveda about 3,500 years old, which means it's older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than the Iliad and Odyssey, older even than the legendary King David. The Rigveda is also important because it's the earliest Vedic text we have. The word Vedic refers to a larger body of texts which were compiled over a long period of time and which eventually formed the foundation of Hinduism. The Rigveda was followed by the Samaveda, the Yajurveda, and the Atharvaveda. Now, each of these texts has a different focus, but together they form a kind of library of ancient Indian thought. As I said, the Rigveda is a collection of hymns. It's divided into 10 mandalas, which are like books, and within each book, there are hymns addressed to various gods and goddesses. There are 10 principal gods, but there are many others as well. Most of the hymns are addressed to just a few of these deities, though. These include Agni, the fire god, who acts as an intermediary between humans and other deities. He's the god of sacrifice. Indra is a storm god, and he's associated with rain, thunder, and lightning. Ushas is the dawn. Rudas is the sun. Rudra is a fearsome, wild god of the hunt. He's later identified with Shiva, and he represents the untamed forces of nature. There's a group of twin gods, the Ashvins, who are healers and bringers of light. And finally, there's the goddess Savitri. She's associated with the life-giving power of the sun, and she is a powerful and complex deity who plays a central role in the Rigveda. Now, most scholars agree that the Rigveda was composed by, or at least reflects the beliefs of a group of nomadic or semi-nomadic people who lived in what is now northwest India and Pakistan. And it seems likely that these people were pastoralists, herders of sheep and cattle. They would have moved their flocks in search of grazing land, and they would have lived a relatively simple life, focused on family and community. But these people weren't isolated. They interacted with other groups, and those interactions sometimes led to conflict. So the Rigveda also reflects the worldview of people who lived in settled agricultural communities. These people farmed the land and lived more settled lives, and they often had more complex social structures. And because the Rigveda reflects the beliefs of both of these kinds of societies, it gives us a rare window into the worldviews of two very different kinds of ancient people. So what can we learn from it? Well, perhaps the greatest lesson of the Rigveda is this: knowledge does not begin with answers, but with questions. Let me explain. 3,000 years ago, they asked, where did creation come from? Today, scientists still search with telescopes and equations. The answers may change, but the fire of the question, the sacred flame, still burns. And when we hear the Rigveda, we are not just listening to the past. We are hearing our own voice, echoing across time, reminding us that to ask is to live. When I read the Rigveda today, I am struck by the sheer power of the questions that are posed. They are questions that we still haven't answered. The Rigveda asks us to consider the vastness of the cosmos. How do we know that the Earth is round? Because we've only known it for about 500 years. For most of human history, the Earth was flat. Any pre-modern person, and they will tell you that the sun travels across the sky each day, or that the stars travel around the Earth. This is exactly what is described in the Rigveda. It describes the sun as a chariot with golden spokes and 7 horses that fly across the sky. It says that the night is dark and cold, and the sun comes to banish it and bring light and warmth. It even mentions an eclipse. So the people who wrote the Rigveda didn't really understand how the universe works, but they were curious, and they wanted to understand. And so they created stories and myths to try to make sense of the world around them. They asked questions. And by asking questions, they created the foundation for science. They also asked questions about life. Who are we? Where do we come from? What happens after we die? In the Rigveda, there's a hymn addressed to the goddess Savitri, and it describes the journey of a soul after death. And I want to read part of it to you because I think it's really beautiful. Do not depart, O Savitri. Do not abandon us for the long journey. Do not take us for the terrible path. No, do not make us wander. O Savitri, far away. No, do not lead us into darkness. The poet is addressing Savitri, the goddess of the dawn, and he's asking her to help guide the soul on its journey through the darkness after death. The soul is like a traveler who's lost and afraid, and he's asking for help. And Savitri, the dawn, is the light that pierces the darkness and leads the way. Now it's hard not to hear the echoes of this hymn in the great religions that came after. Religions like Buddhism and Christianity, religions that talk about heaven and hell and the afterlife. But the Rigveda is onto scripture in the same way that the Bible or the Quran are scriptures. It's more like a collection of myths and stories and poetry. The people who wrote it weren't trying to create a religion. They were just trying to understand the world around them. But in doing so, they asked important questions about life and death and the afterlife. And by asking these questions, they laid the groundwork for religious thought for centuries to come. The Rigveda also asks questions about society. For example, there's a hymn that talks about how to properly sacrifice. The hymn talks about the importance of giving, and it says that you should give to those who are worthy. This is a really interesting question because it gets at the heart of what it means to be human. What does it mean to give? Why should we give? And to whom should we give? The hymn goes on to say that you should give to those who are in need, and you should not be stingy. And it talks about the importance of sharing and caring for others. Again, these are questions that we still haven't fully answered. But by asking them, the people who wrote the Rigveda were able to create a society that was more just and equitable. In short, the Rigveda is a remarkable text because it shows us that the human desire to understand the world around us is as old as civilization itself. It shows us that we've always been curious about the universe and about ourselves and about the society we live in. And it shows us that these questions are just as relevant today as they were 3,500 years ago. So what can we learn from this? Well, I think the main lesson of the Rigveda is that we should never stop asking questions. We should never stop being curious about the world around us. And we should never stop trying to understand ourselves and the society we live in. Because by asking questions, we become more than just passive observers. We become active participants in the world around us. And we begin to understand that the world is not a static place. It's a dynamic place that is always changing and evolving. And we are a part of that change. We are a part of that evolution. And by asking questions, we can help shape the world for the better. So I hope that when you read the Rigveda, you will be inspired by the curiosity and the wonder of the people who wrote it. And I hope that you will be reminded of the importance of asking questions and never, ever stop learning. That brings us to the end of this first episode of What the Ancients Knew. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. Today's episode is extra special. You know how they say there are 6 degrees of separation between any two people on Earth? Well, I found my connection to the great poet Rumi. He wrote, "Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." I think we are all seeking that field where we can be at peace. This week's verse has some echoes of Rumi's poetry. Let's read the verse first and then discuss its deeper meaning. As the seers speak, they themselves vanish like smoke. They transcend name and form. The self transcends all limitations. There is no bondage for the one who knows this. It seems that today's verse is simple enough. We are told that those who have realized their true nature do not identify with anything. Their sense of identity is not attached to anything. So when they speak, they just speak from that transcendent state. They don't care whether anyone listens to what they have to say or not. They don't care about their reputation or their legacy. They speak, and then they vanish like smoke. The seer, as we saw in the last episode, is someone who sees reality as it is. Someone who realizes his true nature. Someone who understands his oneness with the divine. Now, once the seer speaks his truth, he disappears from the scene. Why does he disappear? Why would he want to disappear after speaking the truth? Why would he let his words hang in the air unanswered? The answer lies in the very structure of this verse. Pay attention to the first half and second half of this verse. The first half ends with the line, "They transcend name and form. The self transcends all limitations." In the second half, we are told, there is no bondage for the one who knows this. What is this thing that the seer transcends? What is this thing that causes bondage? It is identification with name and form. The seer does not identify with his name, with his lineage, with his physical form, or with the reactions that his words might cause in others. He doesn't identify with any of these things because he knows his true nature. He knows that he is not the body. He is not the mind. He is not even the seer of the mind. He is the pure consciousness from which the seer arises, the same consciousness that pervades everything. So when he speaks from that state of pure consciousness. His words are like ripples on the surface of a vast lake, beautiful and serene, but ultimately meaningless. God can hold on to them, and so they vanish like smoke. But here's the paradox. Those words, though seemingly meaningless, touch something deep within us. They resonate with our deepest yearnings, and in that resonance we find our liberation. The seeker, as we saw, is the one who seeks. But what does he seek? He seeks the truth, but the truth is already there. He seeks his true nature, but his true nature is already there. He seeks to go home, but home is where he always has been. Yet the seeker keeps on seeking because he has forgotten that he is the truth he seeks. He is the treasure he seeks to find. And so he goes on a long and arduous journey, only to realize in the end that he was seeking himself all along. In the Upanishads, it is said that the seer is unborn, eternal, and has always existed. The seer is not born, and yet he experiences birth. Why? Because he identifies with the body. He forgets his true nature and tries to live as if he were the body. He acts as if he were limited by time and space, but this is not the case. The seer is free from all limitations. He is free from all fears and worries. He is free from all attachments. He is free from all bonds. When the seeker realizes this, he becomes fearless. He becomes detached. He becomes free. And then he is no longer afraid of death. He is not afraid to speak his truth, even if it means going against the grain, even if it means going against the crowd. Because the seeker knows that he is not the body, he is not the mind, he is not the intellect, he is not the ego. He is the consciousness from which all these arise. And so he is immortal. He is beyond fear. He is beyond worry. He is beyond attachment. The seeker, when he realizes his true nature, becomes fearless. He starts speaking the truth fearlessly, even if it means losing everything. He loses nothing because he has gained everything. He has realized his true nature. He has realized that he is one with the divine. He has realized that he is one with all beings. So he speaks the truth without fear. Let's take a look at the history of this hymn. It's a very old hymn, probably composed around 1500 BCE, but it's not attributed to any particular rishi or seer. It's an anonymous hymn. And that's interesting because it points to the timeless quality of this wisdom. It's not bound by time, space, or any particular culture. It's universal. It's a truth that everyone can realize. It's a truth that everyone can experience. It's a truth that everyone can live by. Now, this is not easy to do, to live by this truth. To live by this truth means to be fearless, to be detached, to be free from all bonds, to be free from all limitations. It means to be truly alive. It means to be truly human. It means to be truly spiritual. But it's possible. It's possible if we practice, if we meditate, if we surrender to the divine. Here's what the saint and mystic Kabir said. If you want to reach the other shore, you must first burn the boat. If you want to cross the ocean of life, you must first make a vow, renounce everything, leave everything behind, both good and bad, and then walk into the forest alone. There, under the guidance of a true guru, you will realize the truth of your being. That is when you will know who you are, what you are capable of, and what is your destiny. This is what the seeker needs to do, to renounce everything, to leave everything behind, and to walk into the forest alone. Only then will he realize his true nature. Only then will he realize that he is one with the divine. As we close today's episode, remember this. The song did not end in a distant fire long ago. It crossed centuries, languages, and empires to arrive here to you, sitting now before a glowing screen. Whether you are watching from your computer or listening through your phone in the palm of your hand, you are part of this living chain. The Rigveda survived by being passed from mouth to mouth, from memory to memory. Today it survives again through stories we share here. If you felt the fire, if you heard the echo in your own heart, then follow _history story. Because each time you return, each time you listen, you are adding your own voice to the eternal chorus. And together we will ensure that the song of humanity, the song that began with the Rigveda, will never fade.